Hello, my name is Imrie, and this is our summary review of the Netflix film Good Grief. To summarize the film, around Christmas time, Mark not only watches his husband Oliver die, but it's also revealed to him that Oliver had what technically wasn't a secret life, but as we learn in the movie, there have been certain concessions that Mark made in order to remain in a relationship with Oliver. And unfortunately for him, he comes to learn that Oliver took those concessions, and he unfortunately died before there could be a real conversation about what happened. Because of this, Mark is a little bit on edge, but luckily, between his friend Sophie and his best friend slash ex Thomas, for a year they kind of coddle him, try to make him feel better about everything, and then at a year mark, they not only learn the truth, but they're forced to face their own truths regarding their relationships or lack thereof. So, getting to the review portion, what Good Grief does best isn't necessarily focus on grief in terms of Oliver and his death, but the grief that comes with being alone or is lonely. For even though it's very much about not Mark dying, but Oliver dying, it's really about, when it comes to Mark, Thomas, Sophie, and even Mark's finance person Imelda, how people handle either love they had, love they never had, or the love they wish they had. And just to break that down a little bit, with Mark, he makes it very clear when it comes to his relationship with Oliver. Again, there were certain concessions that he made because he felt that he had to, and that maybe he wouldn't have found somebody as attractive or interesting of Oliver. And you can tell that part of his grief is that in order to find someone who loved him like Oliver, he had to make these concessions, and he kind of has to deal with the fact that he opened the door for certain things to happen. And even though he thought maybe they would never happen, he just wanted to give Oliver some amount of freedom. And giving him that freedom, unfortunately, there are both known and unknown third parties who got involved in their marriage. Then when you switch it over to Thomas, unfortunately, he's felt like he's never been the one. He's never been the person that, others went for instead of pushing him aside, which includes Mark. And being that everybody's in their 30s at this point and coming to that point where they're all monetarily stable and everything, you can see in that whole usual checkbox thing, the next thing would be is a stable relationship. But unfortunately, in the case of Thomas, he can't secure the type that not only he wants, but he deserves. And Sophie's kind of on the flip side. Because she's so vibrant, kind of eccentric, and still attractive, even if her dating profile is terrible from what we're told, one of the things that she struggles with is the idea of a forever person. And as much as the idea of safety isn't terrible, at the same time, you can tell that there's a part of her that still wants to have fun, freedom, and maybe in some ways, the reason why she loved Oliver so much is that she got him, and perhaps wanted the same type of agreement that Oliver had with Mark when it comes to Sophie's relationship with a guy named Terrence. It's hard to say since, as we'll go into later, Sophie's a little bit of a mystery compared to the other guys, or the other people in this film rather. And that's honestly kind of strange because she's one of the people who are literally in the poster for the film, compared to Imelda, who is an older woman, but she makes it clear that she did love once, and it's just after that love ended, she decided to, instead of find love again, she got married to her work. And through these four characters and their conversations about loneliness, relationships and everything, that's where you really get the idea of what Good Grief is truly about. It's not about Oliver dying. It's about the grief that sometimes comes from relationships. And in terms of being good grief, sometimes the grief forces you to hold yourself accountable, to recognize things within yourself, whether you're single or in a relationship. And the way that this film is made, especially if you're a single person, it forces you to reflect in a certain type of way, which can be difficult at times, but at the same time can also feel a little bit necessary. But getting to the on offense portion, again, it's weird that the lead female role which is Ruth Negga's character. She's somebody who, unlike Thomas and Mark, is generally upbeat, gives much needed energy to this film, and yet we don't get the same type of backstory with her, or any real backstory at all. With Mark, we learned that part of the reason why he's the way he is when his mom died, he kind of rushed into this relationship with Oliver and he never properly grieved, to the point where he even stopped painting because it reminded him of his mother. So you kind of get why Mark is so downtrodden by not only the death of his husband, but then kind of having to really force himself or allow himself to grieve in a way that he's been holding back for so long. With Thomas, him not being the one, even though we don't go deep into the wound, when you take note of the relationships that aren't working out within this movie, the fact that things didn't work out with Mark, even though the two seem to get along well, you can imagine there being a pattern of him being the stable one, him being the one who's always there for people, yet he can't find the same for him, and you can feel something for him. You can understand how his character became this way. The same can't be said for Sophie, and it's really weird because Imelda, even though she's not a huge role, we get a breakdown of her life to the point we can understand how she became this notable businesswoman handling major accounts because she experienced love, thought it was good enough one time, married her job, and now, while as an older person, she kind of feels like all this work was trying to fill the void that's starting to become bigger than the work that she has, especially as she potentially goes toward retirement. Again, there's a feeling that why is it that for Thomas, Mark, and Imelda, who's a minor, almost supporting character, we get so much about them so we can get their background, but Sophie, who's the main one with energy, who definitely has her own individual draw, all we know is that she is a hot mess. And why she's a hot mess is not really clear because we don't know much about her parents, we don't know much about her relationship history besides Terrence. All we're given is the idea that she's a fun-loving woman, and she's maybe has commitment fears for reasons that, again, aren't tapped into enough for you to really get a sense of why. But overall, when it comes to Good Grief, a part of me is glad this came out in January and not February because it feels like the kind of film that could easily hit a nerve if you're not prepared. And one of the things I appreciate is that it doesn't quickly rush by or through negative feelings when it comes to dating, but instead it dwells a bit. And yes, in the dwelling it does become a bit slow and maybe not as quick and easy for a lot of people, but because it forces you to acknowledge all the struggles you may have had and your response to said struggles, it's a movie that definitely can make you feel a bit contemplative about what's the next chapter in your life. Never mind what lessons have you learned from previous chapters.